Number 9, Missouri, blown out 41-10 at number 25, Texas A&M. Number 4, Tennessee, beat 19-14 at Arkansas. And most surprisingly, top-ranked Alabama, losing 40-35 at Vanderbilt. Saturday, October 5th was a shocking day for college football, with fans witnessing the most upset-filled weekend since November 2016. However, this year is different than previous seasons due to the new college football playoff structure, and while 2 SEC losses may have spelled certain doom in the past, the path to the playoffs is now much wider. After a word from our sponsors, we'll hear Jeff Palermo and Todd Horne sit down with ESPN.com's Chris Lowe to break down the past weekend and look forward to the next, when Brian Kelly's LSU Tigers return to Tiger Stadium to face off against Ole Miss in what promises to be an early SEC heavyweight battle. I'm your host, Jake McMains, and we'll be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Munnerlin, and we're here to smash the capital city's trash.
Smash My Trash is a revolutionary compactor for large dumpsters, sometimes reducing the volume of waste by up to 70%. This means fewer hauls per month and big savings for your business. Fewer hauls and compacted waste will also result in a positive impact on our community and our environment by taking up less space in our local landfill sites. Schedule your company's free demo today. Call 225-497-0101.
Y'all ready? Yeah. Let's go. Come on.
Tiger Rag Radio is on the air.
Let's crank this thing up.
We're statewide, breaking down the latest happenings with LSU athletics.
This is us.
Hear from the coaches.
Put together a defense that puts us in a position to win the SEC.
The players.
Having fun and we working, baby. That's it, man.
The recruits.
Show some passion and some heart.
And those who cover the Fighting Tigers of LSU and the SEC.
All those things are going to be there, which are important.
It's 2 hours of nonstop LSU talk.
What a privilege. I mean, you get to represent LSU.
Tiger Rag Radio is brought to you by Cummins. Cummins creates power solutions that the world depends on. Helm Paint and Decorating. The paint experts of Louisiana. Louisiana Beef Industry Council. Max Home. And the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Get ready to talk Tigers with producer Jackson Blackman and our hosts, Todd Horne and Jeff Palermo.
3 great players that are better people than they are players.
This is Tiger Rag Radio.
Well, we're going to have, let's get to our first guest here. We bring in the esteemed Chris Lowe, who covers college football for ESPN.com. He joins us on the Max Home Hotline, over 50,000 Max Happy homeowners and counting. And what a weekend this past weekend was in college football, one of the best that I can remember in several years, with Alabama getting knocked off by Vanderbilt, Arkansas defeating Tennessee. It was just a lot of fun to watch it all go down, and it was chaos everywhere you looked. And Chris, thanks again for joining us here tonight. How you doing?
Great, yeah. College football seems to get more boring by the weekend.
I know people say this on Twitter every Saturday. I seemingly see this being said, but for those that are not college football fans, I feel sorry for them. I just don't know how they get that kind of rush anywhere else. Well, I'm sure there's other ways you can find that kind of rush, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, there's just nothing like it from 11 a.m. till, well, heck, this past Saturday, if you stayed up for the Cal-Miami game, I mean, it was 11 a.m. to 1 a.m., just absolute glorious storylines being developed and fantastic finishes and great comebacks and upsets and everything you want.
And all those games you mentioned probably will play some type of role in what 12 teams make the playoff. And I know this is, uncharted water for all of us, a 12-team playoff as opposed to 4 teams. But, even with a bad loss like Alabama sustained at Vanderbilt or Tennessee at Arkansas, with 12 teams now, you get a little bit of a mulligan. And I think that makes October, to me, and November even more entertaining. I mean, you look at LSU's run coming up, starting with Ole Miss this week. You still got a Texas A&M in there. You got an Arkansas in there. You got a Bama in there. So it's there's a lot of teams, in my estimation, right now in the SEC. Probably Texas is the best team, but, stick with me in a month from now, right? But
right.
Probably they're the best team. But you really could pick about, what would you say, 6 others that legitimately have a chance to play their way into the playoff in the SEC.
Yeah,
and I think these two teams are going to play Saturday and Tiger Stadium are in that group, Ole Miss and LSU.
Oh, for sure, for sure. How many teams from the Southeastern Conference do you think get into the 12 team? Is it 4?
I think four for sure. And if it were to fall just right, maybe let's say that the Big 12 is a one team, gets one team in, the ACC just one team, then that's probably good for the SEC. Let's say Notre Dame loses again.
Yeah.
That's good for the SEC.
Right.
So I think what happens in other conferences, but I would be very surprised if not at least 4 from the SEC get in this year.
Well, Chris, all this playoff talk is extremely interesting, and it's perfectly timed right now where we are almost halfway through the season. But I want to know the really important information. Like, is Kalen DeBoer's house still standing, or has it been burned down?
How many houses for sale signs or home for sale signs were put on his front yard?
Yeah, it's good to see that the folks in Alabama are taking that loss very well.
The players took it well too.
No overreactions. No, the defense wasn't very good, but I was appalled that Kalen DeBoer did not tuck his shirt in during the game.
I know, man.
Hey, welcome to that job. All right, welcome to. And listen, I spent enough time around Kalen. He knew what he was getting into, and I don't think any of this is a surprise or shock. Certainly, he didn't expect to lose to Vanderbilt, but he understood that as soon as something went wrong, that it was going to be like, the earth was falling. And the funny thing is, a week before, everybody was talking about. I mean, how many of these type of references did you see? Well, maybe Saban was holding that team back.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the way they played.
Yeah, right.
Look at, freshmen on the field making plays, and now all of a sudden, a week later, lo and behold, they lose to man. And again, it goes back to the outset of our conversation. It's sort of the beauty of college football: the ups and the downs, the outrageous takes, the unpredictability from week to week. And every fan, I'm picking on an Alabama's fan base a little bit, but you know what? LSU's, Georgia's, Tennessee's, Florida's, they're all the same way to some degree. And I think that's, again, what makes SEC football what it is.
Well, I think if Ole Miss takes LSU down this weekend, you may see a little bit of derangement syndrome directed at Kelly. Like you said, that's just the way the SEC works. But did speaking seriously here, were you surprised at the way Vanderbilt beat Alabama? Not just that they upset them, but the way they upset them.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're asking. It wasn't fluky. Right. They just lined up. Alabama was not able to stop their option scheme. They had no answers for Diego Pavia, who was exceptional in that game. And when Alabama had a chance to stop them, you go back to the fourth down play, and Vanderbilt throws the touchdown pass. They did not make the types of plays that you got to make, and Vanderbilt did. The job that Clark Lee's done, I don't know how many games they're going to win this year. I think they've got a chance to beat Bowl eligible. I really do. But, it was disappointing they lost to Georgia State, but every other game, they either won or been right there. Missouri, they really should have beat Missouri.
Right.
But from where they were last year, and for him to have the guts to completely overhaul that program the way he did, strength and conditioning, nutrition, he went back to calling the defensive plays. He brought in a new offensive coordinator. It's showing up now in the field, and that team clearly believes. I mean, just something as simple as bringing in Jerry Kill and his experience to be on staff and what he's meant. And of course, when you get a quarterback to transfer in like Pavia, who's like, how would you like to be in the middle of the octagon fighting that guy? Mm-hmm. It makes a big difference. But no, I was surprised. But also, when I've watched Vanderbilt play this year, and I've seen them play 2 or 3 times on television, they're a well-coached football team.
Trains are everywhere. You should always expect one, even on private property. Only cross tracks at designated crossings that fit your equipment. If you don't fit, don't commit. Look, listen, live.
What did you mentioned Missouri there, and of course Vanderbilt should have beaten Missouri. What did you make of Missouri's collapse in College Station this weekend?
Well, I don't know that we should have been surprised by that, by the way they played this year. They just hadn't been a very good football team. They sort of skated by. They've not been very consistent. They've given up points, and I think they're a lot, as far as personnel, I think they're much better than they play. And maybe they find a way to turn it around. You know, Luther Burden, to me, is one of the more electric players at his position in college football. They really haven't been able to get him going the way they did last year. But they've, to this point, they've sort of wasted what I felt like, guys, was the most manageable schedule in the SEC. When you looked at all the schedules when they came out, I thought Missouri probably over and above everybody else. I don't think anybody had an easy schedule, but I thought it was probably the most forgiving of anybody. And now all of a sudden, losing that game the way they did, it's going to be difficult for them, in my mind, to play their way back into that consideration to be a playoff team.
Missouri still has to play at Alabama. What do you think of, I don't mean to pile on Alabama too much, but what do you think of their playoff chances now, Chris? Because they got to go on the road to play Tennessee. They got to go on the road and play LSU. They got to go on the road and play Oklahoma. I mean, there's a good chance they lose 2 out of those 3 games, and that'll probably keep them out of the playoff.
Yeah, I don't think a 9-3 team gets in unless something crazy happens. You know, unless there's complete carnage in the SEC. Which, hey, if you look at who all plays each other,
it could happen
the rest of the way. Maybe that happens.
Yeah,
but no, they've got a tough road. You know, you look at Georgia, and I think Georgia, to me, if you said, all right, Chris, who is the second best team right now in the league, I still probably would say Georgia behind Texas, even though Alabama beat Georgia. But you look at what Georgia's got left. Georgia's still got to play at Ole Miss. They've got to play at Texas here in a couple of weeks, and then they play Tennessee and Athens. So their schedule the rest of the way is really difficult. Can they win all 3 of those games? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, if they lose, if they go 2-1, do they automatically get into 10-2? I think if they go 1-2, they're not going to get in. So, you know, A&M and Texas play the last game of the season in College Station. So you keep sort of talking about these different scenarios. You mentioned Alabama's schedule. I got a feeling we're going to see a lot of teams at the end of the season that have at least 2 losses, and we're going to start trying to separate those teams based on who they lost to, who they beat, where they beat them. It's going to be pretty fascinating, I think, when it's all said and done.
It's time to start betting on yourself. Louisiana 988 can help if you're dealing with tough emotions caused by gambling habits. You can share as much or as little as you want, and it's completely confidential. It's free, available 24/7, and most people who reach out report feeling better right in the moment. Call or text 988 anytime.
Chris, what was your thoughts on Ole Miss bouncing back nicely in their win over South Carolina? And if Trey Harris can't play, their fantastic wide receiver, this Saturday against the Tigers, how could that potentially limit Ole Miss what they do offensively?
Harris to me, has been as good as any receiver in the country. Consistent, he catches the ball. So you take him out of that lineup, that's a big loss for the Rebels. And I think that Jackson Dart has been good enough, and he's played enough football games that I think he still would be able to spread the football around. But if you're LSU defensively, that's one fewer guy that you really have to account for. The thing that Ole Miss has done really well under Lane, and maybe not quite as well this year, is they've run the football. And I think that's the thing. If LSU can get them into situations where they're not able to run the ball and have some success on first and second down and have to throw the football, where Dart's having to throw it 40-plus times a game, and I think that's the way LSU wins this game. And Ole Miss is, they have not played what I would call a killer schedule, but they have had 2 straight pretty tough SEC games in a row. Kentucky, which beat them, and then South Carolina last week on the road. And I think one of the big storylines in this game is LSU coming off a break where Ole Miss is having to play its 7th straight game. And that game is obviously in Baton Rouge. I think that really, I was surprised, honestly, to see Ole Miss was favored in this game.
I'm still surprised.
I think when you look at all those factors, now, so I don't know how that line moves depending on what Trey Harris's availability is. But when you look at the wear and tear of having to play so many games in a row, as Ole Miss has, and you get a team coming off a bye, which LSU is, and you're playing at home, to me, those are big factors in this football game.
Chris, your thoughts on Tennessee and just what happened to them Saturday against the Arkansas Razorbacks, and I mean just how impressed, and also considering that game, just how impressed you were with how Arkansas, who had lost a couple of fourth quarter leads this year against Oklahoma State and Texas A&M, rallies to win that game.
Yeah, I'll start with Arkansas and Sam Pittman. That was a must game for them and a huge win to be able to get that game out at home. They'd been in every game. They'd lost, as you said, they lost some close games and really beat themselves that first game against Oklahoma State. Guys, they gained 650 yards and somehow managed to lose it. So to win that game and make plays, to drive the football, those last two drives for touchdowns without their starting quarterback and their starting running back was really impressive. I thought Tennessee was exposed, much like Ole Miss was exposed 2 weeks ago against Kentucky. I think probably if you talk to the folks there in Oxford and Knoxville, both of those teams maybe aren't quite as good offensively as a lot of people thought they were, because neither one of those teams played great competition the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Now, they both are good on defense. I think Tennessee, like Ole Miss, is really good up front defensively, probably better than they've been in a long time. And you might see Tennessee, if they're going to play their way into the playoff, have to lean more heavily on their defense than their offense, which is surprising given what Josh Heupel's offenses have done the last few years.
Chris, your thoughts on what may happen on Saturday night, and do you feel LSU's defense has improved enough to make sure that this one doesn't get out of hand like it did last year in Oxford?
Yeah, I don't know that we have enough of a sample size to really say that LSU is appreciably better on defense. I think they're better. Of course, they couldn't be worse, right? To be honest, there's no way they could be worse. They do look a little bit more sound. I think they've tackled a little bit better, but they will face, even if Harris is not out there, they've still got Juice Wells. Jackson Dart is in his third year as a starting quarterback in this league. You don't find that every day anymore. So there will be a lot of challenges for this LSU defense. And again, I think it gets down to LSU not letting Ole Miss really establish the run and getting into a rhythm running the football. And if they can do that and put it all on Dart's shoulders, in particular if Trey Harris is not there, or even if he's playing but not close to 100%, then I think that's the way LSU wins this football game. This is a tough assignment. I'm not much of a betting man, but I think playing at night, playing there in Baton Rouge, and have to play so many straight games for the Rebels, this is going to be a hard game for them to win.
Chris, thanks a lot for hanging with us for a while here tonight. We really appreciate it. Always love your insight and your coverage of the Southeastern Conference at ESPN.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Have we got a September for you? Your East Baton Rouge Parish Library has 3 opportunities to meet author Jerry Pallotta, famous children's book author of Who Would Win? See art by Clementine Hunter and enjoy the sounds of the Baton Rouge Concert Band. These are just a few of the special things happening in September with your EBR library. Details are at ebrpl.com. That's ebrpl.com.
All right, that'll be it for today's episode. Thank you, Chris Lowe, Todd, and Jeff for the discussion. We'll be back later this week, but until then, stay tuned to TigerRag.com for all your latest LSU sports news.